Good morning and welcome. Let me start, as the other chairs have started, by thanking INEGE and the United Nations for organizing this and all the participants for the terrific presentations. I must say I'm glad I'm not head of a statistical office because INEGE has set a high bar here for country support, service, and everything else. So congratulations and thank you to them in this effort. Today is something more of a wrap-up session. We've heard lots of really excellent presentations and examples of how some of this work might proceed. But I hope today we are able to move forward. So just in people's thinking, I'd like you to ask you, in your interventions and the presentations, that people sort of think more about what are the big takeaways that you'd like to come out of this conference in terms of ideas, future directions, those sorts of things as you move forward. You know, as I sort of look at what we've talked about so far, we've talked about a possible framework, and I tend to think about that framework as, you know, we've got, you could imagine a system, and I think all systems should absolutely be based on the system of national accounts and the balance of payments manual. Everybody's done a lot of work, is doing a lot of work to get those things done and finished and comply, at least for the important economic items to their countries, in those basic set of guidelines. So we don't want to upset that apple cart at all. But when we think about extensions to them, if we want to think about things in terms of a value-added chain, or I want to think about how firms behave from ownership basis, or I want to look at the productivity of the enterprise as opposed to the national productivity. National productivity of a company like Apple is going to look weird, but as an integrated organization, it looks good, reasonable, and you understand it better. For tax policy, you probably want the integrated view of the organizations. So you can imagine, and I think we've seen examples of many different dimensions along which you would like to take a different cut or drill down in the existing statistics. But I don't think we want just, and I've seen this happen before, lots of satellite accounts running around without some commonality to them. And you don't want to get too far in the process. I've always been one who, I think it's important to experiment before you set rigid rules, but I think beginning to come to some consensus about guidelines and concepts for these extended sets of accounts will be helpful so that we aren't down the road doing lots and lots of adjustments and reconciliations and policymakers, I think Jocko has made this point, data that sort of fits together so you don't get conflicting results. I've spent part of my life on the policy side, and I absolutely understand that working with policymakers. So I think, you know, we've got to be careful with names, what we do, that whatever happens is non-duplicative. It isn't regulatory in nature, a command sort of, here's what thou shalt do. But I think some degree of organization and concepts is an important issue. We've also heard a lot during the conference about the really important work that can be done in harmonizing existing accounts because, as again, the stepping stone for all these things, at the core of them is the existing accounts. So the harmonization, which we're going to talk about this system, is terribly important. And then because of the large information requirements, the difficulties in data collection, at least my view would be that we want to improve supply and use tables, and we're going to be talking about that and how we can do indirect estimates of much of which we like to get to using existing data and improve the existing data, and then begin to focus our efforts, as many have, on the type of surveys and data collection vehicles we need to provide the information to feed these new sets of accounts. Okay, and just a brief note about format, to try and speed things up a bit and make sure we try and focus on the top issues. When we go to the interventions, I will ask you confine your interventions to 1, maximum 2 minutes, and that you, again, think about what your main point is. You know, we don't need 5 points, just what is your main point as we go through this intervention. Now, I want to also note there's been a change to the format a bit. The last session today is going to be a pure wrap-up session, a panel discussion, and to get a little better country representation, we've asked Canada to make an extended intervention to get a little more country balance in this discussion. Okay, so who do we have first? Look at my agenda. Ronald, you're first.
Good morning, everyone. Third day, it's always more difficult. I think this morning we were touching upon some of the work streams. I think necessary to improve statistics in this area. And I will start on this with the asymmetries in bilateral trade statistics, based on one of the 3 discussion papers we have specifically prepared for this conference. The other 2 were Steve's paper on the extended international accounts and Stacy Frederick's paper on the global value chains and classifications which we might want to change. And now the third one is here on asymmetries. This is one of the issues we have to look much closer at, because once we start building a global supply and use table, we need to have harmonized trade data. So far, and I've been working quite a long time in international trade statistics, we've sort of let it go by that countries have different ways of, even though there are international recommendations, everybody does it a little bit differently, which may lead to asymmetries. But if we going to build a global supply and use table, we have to have harmonized data in there. And instead of international organizations together trying balancing out data coming in, we really would like input here from countries and try from the start on to see if we can get better bilateral trade data. And this was also indicated in the paper, the starting points here is actually that there was, especially since about 3-4 years, a lot of questions raised about the gross trade values, and new measures should be derived. This trade and value added project was started, and part of that is a much closer look at the input to a global supply and use table to derive those kinds of estimates. It's like if we accept the input, we'll accept the indicators. If we do not accept the input to the supply and use table, it will be very difficult for countries to use this in their policies. So that I think is the challenge of getting getting the use of this and getting accepted bilateral trade data. Now there are a number of reasons why currently the gross flows of international trade statistics, and mainly I'm talking here about international trade in goods, the merchandise trade, why they are different. One is just from the basic concept of the country of origin on imports compared to country of destination on the export side. These are data compiled by 2 different administrations. To have those kinds of data match up completely is actually very difficult to imagine unless 2 different national administrations would work together, as in the case of Canada and the US, where they got together and tried to make this work, given the fact that even neighboring countries can have a lot of asymmetries. Now, what I will one of the proposals which will come out here is like, should we instead of looking at country of origin and destination, look more at country of consignment? Country of consignment, to simplify the idea, would be more direct trade between countries instead of trade where the ultimate receiving country goes back to country of origin based on the substantial transformation of the goods, skipping any intermediate countries where there might have been minor adjustments. The other point which will come back here is valuation, CIF FOB. It's been a very well-known difference in valuation between imports and exports. Current recommendations are to have imports FOB also reported by countries. So we're hopeful that this will be solved at country level, but I'll say a few words about how we could move that way. Finally, trade system. I'll say a little bit about that. I mean, if countries' economic territory is different, this will cause also asymmetries in reporting. Finally, manufacturing services. We will have a presentation of IMF on this, but I will also say a little bit about that, and especially also where for a supply and use table it might be an issue about what happens with intermediate inputs used by the processing company. Now, country of origin destination is a rough schedule, but something that actually will happen. Trade between China and Germany going via Hong Kong and the Netherlands is something very imaginable, that trade actually will go this way. The way it's currently reported, it would be that Hong Kong reports imports from China, the Netherlands reports imports from China, and Germany reports imports from China of the same kind of goods. Where Hong Kong will report a re-exports to the Netherlands, and Netherlands might report the re-exports to Germany. But in the reporting itself, you can already see that this is definitely leading to some discrepancy, because most of the trade will be reported as imports from China, and on the export side it is being diverted to various countries. So if we take country of consignment as a more of a theoretical way of doing this, it would be imports from China to Hong Kong, imports from reported by Hong Kong from China, imports reported by the Netherlands from Hong Kong, and imports reported by Germany from the Netherlands. And we would have corresponding exports and re-exports on that side. So this might lead to better correspondence. And so from a conceptual point of view, we might think about is this the right way of reporting? Is this the way we can actually reduce significantly some of the asymmetries from the start? Second issue, CIF FOB. We have in our in the compiler's manual for merchandise trade a few methods about how to obtain imports FOB at country level in the compilation. One would be just recorded per transaction, but in practice that's mostly not happening. A second one would be that you have this per shipment, and you could imagine this freight insurance by container, if you like, and then break it down by the individual transactions of goods inside that shipment. That's a way Brazil is doing it, and we have that country practice in the compiler's manual if you would like to read more about it. Thirdly is a method which is used in Morocco, and our colleague from Morocco is here, in which they sample freight and insurance, let's say percentages, by the commodity code, partner country, and mode of transport, and then adjust accordingly in the compilation to make import CIF to FOB. I think that's so. It's a bigger matrix they use to do this, and I think it's a very nice way of doing that adjustment, quite sophisticated. Trade system. In our global survey, which we did in 2006, it actually showed that 50% of countries use general trade system, which includes free zones, custom warehousing, processing zones. But there's also 50% who use special trade zones, and they exclude at least part of that, either free zones, either custom warehousing, or even sometimes their processing zones. Of course, that leads to differences in coverage. Within this community of merchandise trade statisticians, we've encouraged countries to really at least record all of the elements necessary for general trade systems so that you could make those adjustments, and that you would also have it in case you do reconciliation studies. So general recommendation is to really have all of these elements of the general trade system. Another point is the manufacturing services. So countries are gradually moving towards recording, for BOP purposes, manufacturing services and adjusting the BOP trading goods flows. it's a question actually if which flows we want to use for the supply and use tables. And this is a question to the floor. Is it, do we want to go in the direction of the BOP trading goods flows instead of the gross merchandise trade flows for supply and use tables, and have also then of course the trading services flows, including the manufacturing services. If we do so, there is still inputs used by the processing country which needs to be allocated somewhere. And I'll actually show very briefly an example of Hong Kong which does it. I mean, they're neighboring of China. For them it's very important, this processing trade, and they make their adjustments that inputs used in factories in China actually come in the supply and use tables in Hong Kong. But the question is more generally if this is possible for all countries to get that done. And we're now in this time frame in which we are implementing BPM6. We're implementing 2008 SNA, and we have to address that question. What we will see this morning, there is let me put it another way. We have a number of ways in which we can, for merchandise trade, try to improve and reduce asymmetries in the trade statistics. One would be reconciliation exercises. And there, I think it's mostly, I mean, reconciliation exercises have been done a lot, and it reduces asymmetries between countries. For the purpose of global supply and use tables, I think we might have additional objectives of reducing it even more, even if we do not want to change our official statistics. Because if you do reconciliation studies between countries, the idea is that your official statistics will be adjusted and reported differently. I think for the purpose of global supply and use tables, we have to take it a step further, be a bit more rigorous in reducing those asymmetries, but maybe not with the objective of changing your official reporting. And I think that's one of the things we might want to see if we can get some rules for that. Now then there are other ways of adjusting it, but that's more from an estimation point of view. And there again, if we do this, I think we should involve countries to see what's happening with their data before they go into global supply and use tables. We have a presentation here from Jaco on how they try to see if they can reconcile large trade differences. Then Lynn will have I think some estimation methods they use at USITC. And then a proposal which was made in the paper by Vladimir is that, okay, if we would not have, so one thing is we could maybe go in the direction of country of consignment. And actually Stats Canada has done some work on that, and maybe they can say a few words about how that works. But the other thing is if we can't go to country of consignment and we use country of origin for imports, maybe we can use the breakdown of country of origin to petition the partner exports data. But again, that's part of the negotiations among countries to see if they are willing to go that way. Finally, we work quite a bit with the World Customs Organization, and they actually have an interest in decreasing discrepancies. But their point of view is a little different. For them, it's like if there is a discrepancy, somebody is reporting it on a fraud basis, right? There is something is disappearing. So they do it more from a security point of view, but it is interesting, and I would like to keep them also part of the group to see if we can make those adjustments. So reconciliation exercises. Oh yeah, I will be talking here mostly about trading goods. Of course, we have the trading services, which is probably more difficult. We need to also try to see if we can do some reconciliation exercises, same way as for trading goods. Here, and I was mentioned, I think by Steve also yesterday, is that instead of going by the imports data, we might want to go by the exports data and break down the imports reported by partners. And then the question is, do we have other methods? Because this is, I think, a more difficult field. But services also needs to be faced. Now, manufacturing services, I will go within 2 minutes about this, just to see how complex this can get. So if there is an affiliate in Mexico working for a mother company in the US, doing the processing there, intermediate inputs could come from the US, but could come from somewhere else as well. It could also come, of course, from domestic suppliers. Then on the export side, it could go back to the US, but it could also be exported to third countries. And all those different scenarios, it's difficult how we can actually capture that. But I think we should try to face it. Now, very quickly, Hong Kong. For them, it's a big deal, outward processing. Most of them is with mainland China. They've been doing this already for quite a while because, I mean, this is a large part and relevant for their trade. And I mean, I won't say much about this because it will be covered by Thomas. But what they do have here, the first part is, so it's what kind of services are involved? Well, it's my assembly, labeling, packaging, things like that. Ownership does not change. The fee is charged to the processor, but it also covers the cost of the material purchased by the processor, and that's one part I think we should see where that eventually would be allocated. Would this be stay part of the services, or should it be somewhere allocated in goods, but then in the goods of the main company, the country of the main company actually. Now here is one way of looking at it. You have the processor in mainland China, the exports from goods from Hong Kong to China, where it is processed, and they go back to Hong Kong for a higher value, and the difference of that could be accounted for as import of services. In practice, it's a bit more difficult. There are other countries in there. This is an example directly from the Hong Kong office, in which way they do it. So they have still this the intermediates provided by Hong Kong to China, where they process it, the return goods. But then there is some additional goods from Vietnam, some additional services, and then they try to tease those out and then see what the final imports of services from China was. And Hong Kong is trying to put this in their currently in their balance of payment 6 statistics. That's it.